You are listening to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss our RC adventures.
Welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast, where we discuss the ups and downs of the new RC Flyer. Join your hosts, Michael and Jay, as they take flight at the park. Now on with the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Park Flyer Podcast. I'm Michael from Arizona, visiting Texas, and with me always is my good friend
Jay from the hills of Texas.
And we are having to excuse AK Mike this time because he had a work schedule, and I'm still in that traveling mode. The last podcast we did was from my secret bunker.
Your super secret bunker that cohabitates with NORAD.
That's true.
Under
so
the mountain.
Unfortunately, it's about 117 in Arizona, and my wife and I decided to get out, like we said in the last podcast, and so I made my way down to Texas, and so I've been hanging out with Jay for a little bit, and we've had some pretty exciting adventures that we're going to get to share today. But before we get started, let's give a shout out to A-Power Batteries. We don't have Mike to do the jingle, but
A-Power.
there you go.
Do you need power? We have power.
That's right. A-Power Batteries. You can find them at rcbatteriesusa.com. I know that on the Facebook page a couple of days ago somebody mentioned, hey, this website's not working. What is it? Once again, it's rcbatteriesusa.com. You can type in PFPC10 and receive our discount, and that helps us out as well. So we love these batteries, flying them. They're great batteries. They're nice and small. As a matter of fact, that was one of the things that Mike mentioned, that it didn't weigh as much. He got some of those batteries, and he's like, wow, these batteries are much smaller than the ones he had before. So
well, in one of our topics that are going to be coming tonight, we could have used one of those A-Power batteries.
True. We could have.
I have one or two of my batteries are a little tired.
A little bit.
A little tired. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah. All right. And second of all, we shout out to Eric over at 3daeroventures.com.
Aeroventures.
You can type in Park Flyer and receive a discount off your downloaded plans. So 3daeroventures.com. We'd like to thank Eric for his support as well, and we would like to give him a big shout out, congratulations to Eric, because he that's right, he has an article on 3D printing in the AMA digital magazine. So congratulations for August. The issue just came out basically, but for August he wrote an article in there, and it's a good article. I liked it. It's very informative and kind of gives you a platform to get into 3D printing. So that kind of brings us to our first topic for this podcast is on 3D printing, actually.
Yes, that's true, my friend.
And you've been working really hard. First of all, we're sitting next to each other, so it's kind of weird. We can kind of see each other being here in Texas. Last time, I think we did a podcast several months ago where you were sitting across the desk from me. Unfortunately, that worked well because we could actually see each other across the desk, even though we were recording. This one's kind of weird because we're sitting literally next to each other, and we can reach out and touch. So, if you're able to jump onto our YouTube channel, subscribe to our podcast there. We are now putting out videos with our podcast, so hopefully you'll take a look at that. Subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Give us a like, and we appreciate that.
Yeah, they're actually kind of fun to make, and they're a little entertaining. And what I like about doing them is the fact that when we put some extra content that people can see, when we're trying to describe stuff to people, they can actually see it. We'll pull up something or something funny that they can actually see and understand a little bit better about our babbling or trying to describe something.
Yeah, I think on one of the first ones we did, we were talking about traveling and meeting Eric when you and I drove up to Arizona. Yeah. And Eric said something like, oh, yeah, I'll travel with Jay. And I said, no, I've been in the car for 13 hours with that guy. And I put a picture of Chevy Chase when he was in the desert with all this stuff everywhere. It was a picture up there. We were talking about it. So anyway, I got a comment or two about how funny that was. But we're back in Texas. So anyway, take us through this 3D printing. We've been talking to Eric, and this is a project that you've kind of tried to get your printer dialed in. You've had a printer for a while, and this has been something that's been on your mind for quite some time, is 3D printing an airplane. And with our affiliation with Eric, we now have plans available that we can do some of the smaller airplanes. You've been trying to figure out how to tweak your machine and get the right heating and the cooling and all that kind of stuff.
Which type of plastic I'm going to use. There's a whole bunch of variables. Not to say that it's impossible, people, but it helps to set your machines up first, because if you just jump into it and just start to try to print something, you're going to have some headaches because things aren't going to. You're going to print something out. It should have came out, 1 by 1 by 1, and it comes out, 0.5, 0.5, 0.7. And you're like, why did it do that? So you really have to get your machine calibrated. So I'm finishing up with all the calibrations. Like I said, I have some plans and stuff from Eric. I'm just about to go ahead and pull the trigger and start printing some stuff out. And just before Mike came for his visit, wouldn't you believe it? A 3D printed plane fell into my lap. And I said, well, what a coincidence. I'm about to print one. Here's one that was, pretty much done. Motors installed, servos installed, came to me and just said, hey, I'm never going to fly this thing. You go ahead and take it. I'm like, great, I'll give it a try and have Mike, do the maiden, and we, figure it out and get it together. And boy, did we figure some things out.
Now, I will tell you that when I showed up, it was here, and I was really impressed. But the first thing out of my mouth was, I don't remember that being on Eric's plans, because it's a Cessna 152, and it's a 62-inch. And I was kind of like looking at it, and I was like, "Whoa, did you get something? Did you print this out?" He's like, "No, it fell into my lap."
Right.
And, the guy that wasn't going to fly it, so he found me and just said, "Here, take it out and enjoy." So as I understand it, he built it, and then you and I, as I was sitting there looking at it, I was pretty impressed, because this is really kind of my first 3D fully printed airplane. I've seen some smaller ones, similar to the ones that Eric has, the little minis. But this is the first time I've seen a big 62-inch, full-on landing gear, wheels. Everything was 3D printed. It was very amazing to me.
Right.
But I can see how hard it is and how much time.
Just
a whole new respect for Eric's designs.
Right.
Yeah, because the way you had to fit the gear where the gear snapped in, and then you had to get the battery tray where it would actually open and close.
And it's very well thought out. Like you said, for these guys, when they put the stuff together, you got to give them their props. If it's well designed and it's well thought together, because like you said, this thing, you were talking to me, you were working on the gear, we were doing something, the nose wheel steering, and you were
the nose wheel steering.
I was like, how in the heck do we get in there to not modify, but to adjust it. Mm-hmm. And next thing I hear is crack, 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 click, click, clack, and you're like, hey, it just pops out. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, it just slides in together and pops in and out. You just have to squeeze these two tabs together and it pops out. And I'm like, oh, I never even thought to do that. I thought you had to get a hammer and just break the things apart. I didn't understand how you were going to get it, how we were going to get access to that servo, and it was just amazing how it just popped off, popped in and out of the plane. I was like, that was really well thought out.
Yeah. So. Well, it was pretty impressive, and like I said, this is a design that you and I haven't ever seen.
No.
And you're just gearing up to print out, some of the new ones that Eric has coming out, but. This is a good opportunity for us to play with one, because we haven't really printed.
Right.
You're in the process of all that, and so we spent all night.
Yeah, that kind of surprised me, because when you look at the plane, you're thinking, oh, it's an ARF, or it's pretty much plug and play, right? All I had to do is throw in my my receiver and just go fly it. Not so much.
That's what you thought.
That's what you thought. Yeah. So. Like you said, it pretty much was a plug and play. So just had to plug in my receiver.
Right.
We had to fiddle around with two things: the flaps. Well, basically, it's the wing. We had to fiddle around with the flaps and the ailerons. Mm-hmm. A normal plane, we wouldn't have had to fiddle as much, but because on a plastic or a printed plane, part of the problem that we were having was that the guy didn't do proper prep work on the parts.
True.
So
that's true.
So when you went to move the ailerons, the guide rod was bending. I mean, severely bending. And we're like, what is going on with that?
It looked like a big banana.
Yeah. And so we're like, well, the hinges are there. They're not jamming up. You physically couldn't move the hinge, or you couldn't move the what do you want to call the empennage? Empennage.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't physically move it. It physically was blocked. And so luckily I happen to have these little scalpel sets.
The empennage is actually the body part of it. You're talking about the actual wing. The camber of the wing comes down and it touches the
I'm talking about
aileron.
the part of the actual aileron that moves.
Right.
Yeah.
So that touches the wing. It's the camber.
Yeah.
And
so
you can't change that. So as the wing comes over where the aileron slides into the wing, there were hinges, and when you exercise the up motion, then the 3D print, the two parts touched each other.
Yeah, they were touching.
And then you couldn't exercise it. You couldn't move it. There should have been a seal there or something. He should have carved it back a little bit or
right.
kind of filed it.
So basically, once again, due to the printing, things don't print out exact, or for whatever reason, it wasn't like it was way bigger that it didn't fit together. They did. It's just that sometimes you have to do a little trimming. So I have a set of these things, and they're little miniature chisels that's used for woodworking.
Yeah, those are cool.
And these are perfect. Now I have a little file set to go along with that, just in case you guys couldn't see that. I have a little file set as well that helps to file certain parts. And you can get them at like Harbor and Freight for $3 or $4.
Right.
But this chisel set works out great because what you're able to do is I just went along the part that was rubbing against. Basically, it was the actual hinge. It was a round hinge, and the piece that was above it was just catching on top of the round part of the hinge, right?
Right.
And so basically, all I had to do was just take this thing and just kind of scrape it, and it would just peel off a layer of the plastic, and I just kind of chip my way back. It was really easy to do. It just was time consuming and a little fiddly, but it definitely made a huge difference because we were able to, take off the pressure off those servos that were jamming up, and then the guide rods weren't bending at all after I got done. But it took like half an hour, 40 minutes of fiddly bits of doing the carving, looking. I got old man eyes, got to wear reading glasses. So after I got that done. I basically went and did the other side just to be sure that everything was free and nothing was touching.
Yeah.
So it wasn't terrible. It wasn't a terrible bit of work. It was just different from a regular plane. It's just something to be aware of.
Now, I will tell you, when we looked up the throws on this particular plane, the throws were not horrendous. I mean, they're not 3D throws. They were only about 11 up and 7 down or something like that.
Millimeters, yeah.
So we probably could have gotten away with it maxing out, but it wasn't maxing out at full 7.
It's just one of those things that annoys me. Or I know it annoys you that you can't.
I can't get more throw.
I can't get the total throw out of it, and it's not working like it's supposed to. Yeah, we could have modified in with the radio and got the throws that we needed and messed with it and got it, but had it flexed as much as it was supposed to, it wouldn't be an issue. So
and that was probably something either in the design or the way his printer printed out or something like that. So but so anyway, once he got all that filed down, he's like, okay, it's all filed down, and I jumped on the radio and started moving stuff around and kind of getting everything programmed, and I noticed that the flaps weren't really sitting as flush as they could have been. I don't know. It was
it turned out that was a design.
Yeah.
That was in the design to be that way because you were trying to get them even with the ailerons, and they weren't coming up, and they weren't designed that way. And
so they are Fowler style flaps, which is the actual correct term for them, and they do kind of drop down and out. They're not like a split flap or just a regular flap that comes down. So it was okay that they were like that, but one kind of dragged and the other one didn't, and I think that was one of the things we were kind of frustrated with as well. But we finally figured it all out. I got them matched. I got the ailerons matched. And then I looked down at the radio. We disassembled everything. We're going to go fly it the next day, and I looked down at the radio just on a whim to kind of go through all my settings again and noticed that the aileron trim was full left. Like the entire trim was fully left.
Right. And I had done that previously with the stuff was binding, and I did that so at least it would work.
And it wouldn't bind. So now we spent almost an hour setting all that up with the trim totally maxed out to the left side. So I looked at Jay and I was like, oh my gosh, really? Typical for the two of us, right? The two of us kind of get together, things never go really totally correct. So I went to the sub trim and realized that all the sub trims were all messed up, and then I'm like, oh, why didn't I check all that before? And
but practice makes perfect, right? So it took you a little while the first time, but the second time you zipped right through that.
I did zip right through it.
You got right, it's like, hey, I got it, it's all done. I'm like, wow, that was fast.
Yeah. Now the good news is we set up the throws in the actual travel, so the travel doesn't change, but the actual trims do. So then we just had to, mechanically reset them. We had to move an arm around, and then we just kind of the throws were almost identical to what they were before, and then we just kind of zeroed out the trims and then moved the trims shortly, just a smaller amount so that we had somewhere to start. And then we're ready to go. I think we need to charge the battery, right? Or you needed to solder a new...
That we did have another issue while you were working on the plane and reaching around with those big gorilla fingers of yours. You went to reach down to move the plane or do something. You turned around and you went, tink! And I heard the crackle of plastic and CA and tears.
Yeah.
and there, lo and behold, there's something red rolling down across the carpet.
The top of the rudder.
Top of the rudder. Yeah. You broke that clear.
Now, please understand that this is a big airplane. I mean, it's 62 inches long, and we were working on the floor. And I know you can kind of see behind us if you're on YouTube, but I was on the ground, and I had my my bag with all my tools and everything over here, and I reached over with my left hand, and then when I brought it back across to hand something to Jay, who was on my left side, I just smacked the tail. It was a total accident. I didn't do it purposely. I wasn't even paying attention, but the tail was up high enough that I went snap. And then I was like, what is that? And I looked on the ground, and I'm like, what the heck is that? And
you go, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? I barely touched it. What's wrong with this thing?
I did. I really felt like I barely touched it, but I think I pretty much whacked it pretty hard, actually.
So once again, because he was like, oh, no, do you have to reprint this part? Is this all, terrible, bad, whatever? Right. And I said, no. Once again, this is one of those things that's good and it's bad about 3D printed planes. Most people use CA to put the plane together. And if you don't CA something well enough, or if the CA doesn't take,
right, that's true.
Or even if the plane crashes, you have a mild crash, parts tend to pop off. CA pops, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen that on their planes where you made a repair, you do something with CA, and then you whack it again, and the CA just cleanly breaks off. It didn't bond well enough, or it wasn't clean enough. So it popped right along where it was glued, and just got a little sandpaper, sanded off all the CA, and then I used this stuff called. Of course, I'm going to forget the name of the stuff, but it's basically an acrylic cement for making fish tanks, and it basically melts the PLA plastic together, so it welds the parts together. So it's a little different than CA. So the good part is mild wax like that shouldn't cause the type of popping parts off. The bad part is that if it's going to break or be destroyed, it's going to be destroyed. It's gonna,
Now that was one of the things that I was amazed at, because I picked up this piece and I was like, oh man, I broke the rudder completely in half. And Jay's like, no, that's a totally separate piece. And I'm like, no, it's part of the rudder. And then as I started looking at it, I realized that the bottom is perfectly flat. It wasn't like the other, like the vertical stab. You could actually look inside there and see all the internal parts, where this one wasn't. It was just one piece. And then I realized that the rudder's in 3 separate pieces. They just glued them all together.
Yeah, and it's so well designed that, and when you put it together, you'll see the seam line or the internal structures, and they kind of, they look like they're one. So it's one continuous piece. It looks like it's one piece, but it's actually it was 3 separate pieces, like Mike said.
So I was kind of happy about that, because it meant that I didn't just totally destroy this airplane.
Right.
I just knocked a piece off.
But you brought up another good point with this, and that is, if you make a mistake with this plane, you really have to check the old adage, what is it, measure twice, cut once.
That's true.
Because not so much you're going to be doing cutting on this plane, it's when you go to glue it together. And what I found out from this is, when we were working on back on the ailerons again, right? And I was like, we got to remove this plastic or sand it. It says in the instructions you're supposed to sand this or do this.
Right.
And I'm like, how do we get the ailerons off? And I'm like looking to see. And so I had to actually go back and look at a video of how they put the plane together, and when they put that piece on, they glue a keeper piece, meaning the wingtip goes on the very outside, and once that's glued on, that's what keeps the aileron on.
Yeah, they're like little pins that go in the hole, and then it keeps it from sliding out.
Right? And so all you do is put a blocker piece on the outside, and then it can't move.
Works. Yep.
So it's easy. But if you don't sand your parts, go in there and if he would have went in prior and moved the pieces and saw that, oh man, there's a little friction or there's a little this or that, he could have fixed it then before he glued on the end piece. So that's once again, as I'm saying, I think now when I go to print out Eric's plane, as I'm putting it together, I'm going to be real mindful to sand all my parts, make sure they fit well before I glue it all together, and then you got to get a hammer and smash off the piece to redo something.
I probably will tell you that he's built these and actually probably tested them and has figured some of that out because he.
Oh yeah, sure, I'm sure.
He probably won't be having to do any sanding.
No. Well, but here's the thing: he could have the perfect design.
Yeah, that's true.
But if I have a crappy printer or my printer hasn't been calibrated, it's printing out all sorts of weird things that it prints out and it's still a flyable plane.
Right.
It's just that the parts don't fit perfectly together and it may need some sanding.
Yeah, that's true.
Just the nature of the beast with these things.
Well, I was a little worried about the grass on your field.
That's true, you were.
And so
you were like, you can't take this off the grass field.
It has wheel pants on it, and the wheels are actually 3D printed as well. And they're printed out of that soft stuff that Eric talked about.
Yeah, TPU.
TPU, and so they're really spongy, and it's amazing, that they were able to do that. But I told Jay, I was like, you know what, this is really going to tear this up if we try to go out and fly it off of your grass field, because the grass out here, it's summertime and it's not really thick. It's got some spotty stuff.
Where the EDF, so the L39 has that nice ball link.
Trailing link
gear, and it just soaks up the bumps and bruises out there.
Right.
But
this one doesn't.
But as you found out, though, the front gear has shock absorbers in it.
That's true, it does.
Didn't even notice that. That was something I didn't notice either.
Right.
So the front wheel actually compressed, but it was internal. There's like an internal spring in there or something. I don't know.
Yeah, we got it fixed, but yeah, it's true. So anyway, we decided to go out to this little park. It has I think it's a church parking lot that's attached to an empty lot. And so anyway, we're going to fly in the empty lot. We're going to take it off. And so we got up early in the morning the next day after we spent all night, pretty much to the wee hours of the morning, and got this thing all lined up, and we put it together. I let Jay kind of get it all figured out, and then we had set up the nose wheel steering on a separate switch and a separate servo so that I could actually get some steering because that's the way we do it on the big jets and the turbine stuff. And so we kind of showed him how to do that. I got it where it's tracking straight, so I gave it a little power, tracked it straight. It was kind of pulling one side. I straightened it all out, and now I'm like, okay, well, let's put some flaps in and go fly.
Yep. So we got it all set up. Luckily, we took some pictures as we always do. I'm standing on the left-hand side of Mike, and he goes and slowly advances the throttle. Now, this is meant to be flown off a 3 or 4 cell. I opted to go with the 4 cell because the plane's, it's heavy. It's a lot heavier than you would think for most planes.
That's true.
So I said, I'm going to go with the 4 cell, go big or go home. And I've never heard of having too much power is a bad thing.
Yeah, no. It'll get you off the ground.
It'll get you off the ground and keep you out of trouble. At least
that's true.
That's the theory. So, so we're standing there, and Mike advances the throttle, and I have my camera ready, and he starts to advance, and the plane's slowly rolling down. Everything's working great. It's tracking straight. Perfect. The breeze is blowing the right direction, and he gets past where we're parked, starts to advance the throttle to full, and all of a sudden it goes zzz, bang, and I'm like, "Whoa, what was that?" I mean, like somebody blew something up.
Yeah, I really thought the nose exploded.
And next thing you know, it's just like you just hear parts just raining down over the parking lot, and we're just like, "What the heck was that?" And then it's just silence. No, or no.
The good news is the airplane tracked straight.
It tracked straight the whole way.
I had that going for me.
So we walk up to it, right? And we look, and the whole front of the nose is gone. And we'll show you. We'll get a picture and we'll put it up. Yeah. But it's just gone, like it was sheared off.
Which is amazing.
And so then we're like looking down, and we see a couple of little red pieces. That's what the cowl was made of, red. So we're looking down. There's a few little pieces of red cowling, but there's no engine, no motor, nothing. Nothing's there. And I'm looking around. I'm like, what the heck? And so Mike turns around. He's walking back down the parking lot, going, "Oh, well, he's going to put the radio down." And he goes, "Oh, here's the cowl. Here's the cowling." And I'm like, "What's it doing behind the plane?"
Well, the plane was moving, so when the cowling came off,
I guess I didn't think about that. And I go, "Okay, well, let me see if I can find the motor or something." Right. So I'm thinking that if the cowling came apart or came off, that the motor would have just flown forward, until it pulled loose of the motor wires and then, died. So it should be sitting up the field somewhere or in the field to the left. Nothing. Whew, tumbleweeds. We walked the whole length of the field down, came all the way back to where we were, picked the plane up, took some more pictures. The rest of the plane's fine. Looks beautiful. The
motor can was actually, we found the motor can.
Well, a little later.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, we'd walked the side of this field up all the way up to in front of us. Then we came back and walked it all the way back of us, and then we found a couple more pieces, but we couldn't. No motor, no prop, nothing. It's gone. And I'm like, how does a motor and prop just disappear like that?
It vanished.
It just vanished, and so we're totally confused as where it is. Now I'm looking like on the other side of the field, just looking around as we're walking past my car and the trailer. Mike goes, "Oh, there's the prop." And I'm like, "What? What do you mean, where's the prop?" And the next thing I know, he gets up underneath the car. And I'm like, "What are you doing?" And sure enough, he reaches down there by the passenger's tire, and he pulls up. And he goes, "Up, here's the prop. Oh, here's the motor." And he pulls up the motor and everything. And I'm like, "What the? How did it end up there?"
Now the car is parked like behind us and probably 20 feet away.
When we
started. So, but the airplane was probably even with the back of the car as it was going by. I mean, it was a little,
I guess just the physics on how that explosion and how the motor ended up under the.
And they were separate, by the way. The motor can was separate from the propeller.
From the prop, yeah. So our theory on that is that the guy didn't put the motor in backwards, so he took out the shaft out and then reinserted it backwards so that he can get the motor to go flat up against the cowl from the back of the cowl, and then the propeller and everything would just sit out in front of that on the other side. So you can do that on most brushless motors like that, but you really have to be careful that the only thing holding the motor in is just going to be the set screws that will be on there, and there's usually two of them. So you might have to grind a flat spot on the shaft in this new position. And so the guy didn't do that. Or on some of the motors, they'll have it set up that you can put the C clamp, not clamp.
Yeah,
it's
circlip.
Yeah, circlip.
Yeah, it's a little C clamp.
And this they could put it back there on the reverse side as well. I didn't look like this motor or the shaft was set up for that either.
Yeah, I think it was flush. So it had grub screws in there, but when you have it going in the one way, the flat spot is right where the grub screw is.
Right.
But when you flip it around, now the grub screws are in the front and there's no flat spot. So he just put it on the actual shaft. Yep. And as I accelerated that force cell, when I went from half throttle moving to full throttle to get off the ground, I think that the can expanded.
Right,
it started coming out because there was no C-clip in the back. And as the can came out, it touched the front plastic piece.
I think it just ripped. I think it went at full force. It went right through it.
And anyway, it ejected the propeller. So the propeller went out like one of those things you see that you spin and it goes up in the air. It went out like that, and then the motor just kept going. And then when it hit the ground, it was already spinning, so it rolled underneath. To get where it was. And so, but I was really amazed that, even after all that, we never got it off the ground. It was all of about, 2 seconds of, what just happened? And then
I don't think we've ever had an accident, a mishap, not an accident, a mishap like that one before.
I don't think so.
On rollout, not even full, you weren't even full speed roll up and then something happens. I've had that happen before, but you weren't even up to flying speed yet. And then,
well, actually, we did talk on one podcast about the EDF when I said, abort, or reject my aircraft like that. because the flap was hanging.
Yeah,
the
that's
flap
right.
wasn't-
That's
so
true.
we did have something like that.
That's
but
true.
this it wasn't catastrophic or didn't do any damage. We just aborted our takeoff. But this thing sheared right at that what Jay was talking about earlier, right at the CA line. So you really, believe it or not, all we have to do is print out a new nose for this, and he's got the files. So it'll be interesting, to print that out and then kind of give it a try again. Unfortunately, I think my time here, I have to go back to work. So that was our one shot.
Yeah,
I'm gonna have
that's
to come
the
back.
part that's disappointing.
Yeah, I'm going to have to come back through for the next time. So we're maiden it the next time.
Yeah. Well, we got a lot of things, as you probably see in the background there.
Yeah,
we got
there's
a lot of
lot.
planes to
Yeah,
maiden and a lot
yeah.
of things to do, so a lot of content.
So that was our 3D adventure for the moment.
Yeah.
So we kind of put that in the trailer, and we went on to the field, which was just another 5 minutes down the road, and then we broke out our EDFs. So
Right. And okay, folks, like you said, Mike and I have been doing this for a long time, going out flying, doing things. You think we got our crap together.
No.
You think we got a plan, We're gonna initiate plan Charlie. Okay, I'm on it. Run out there, grab my go bags, and
exactly.
out we go. No, that's not the way that happened, folks. So we go out the very first day prior to what we were doing with this last story. The first day we were like, okay, we're going to go fly our L-39s, go do some formation flying, go have some fun. We get out to the field. We got up the night before. We charged all the batteries. We
were up late too. It was like one or 2 in the morning by the time we got done with all
we got all the batteries charged. My batteries, his batteries. I threw my my charger, not charger, but my generator. Put my generator in the
generator,
back. Put my generator in the back of the thing, and we're all ready to go the next morning. And we get out there and zoom out there. We're all, this is gonna be great. And as Mike's going, he goes, "Hey, where'd you put my batteries?" And I said, "By the front door." With all the stuff, with the planes and all the gear.
I loaded all the stuff at the front door. There was no battery case there.
I guess this is like all old age folks, creeping up on me. I could have sworn I grabbed the battery bag and put it up front. I moved everything else but the battery bag. It was sitting back in the main room where we were. Now, not to put this off on me, okay, because our co-host here walked past the bag several times when we walked into the room, looking around. Do we need anything else? Anything else you want me to carry out? Yeah, no, yes, no. He had to step over the bag.
I did.
Had to walk out
step
the room
over it several times.
So both of us totally missed having to getting this bag. It's amazing. So
it was
so when
amazing.
we showed up, we only had 4 batteries.
Yeah, you actually brought your battery bag.
Yeah.
Mine was sitting here with 12 batteries in it.
Yeah.
And I just had one, and I don't even know. Oh, it was in the airplane.
It was in the something
to
like
keep
that.
the nose down.
Yeah. So anyway, we ended up having a good time anyway, despite that. But it was just one of those things. We get all the way out to the field and
forgot our batteries.
That's it for batteries. So we got to be okay. This flight, we're going to do this.
I think on one of our last podcasts we forgot the radios or something.
Yes.
Got all the way out there and forgot or the wing. I think one of the times
the wing or the wing spar. That's another one. That's a classic.
Yeah, it's pretty typical for us.
So
we get so excited, and the other, we do so much stuff together, and we're so alike that I'm getting my stuff, I'm putting stuff in. I'm like, oh, we got to get this, and Jay's like, yeah, we got to get this, and then in this particular case, he thought I got the batteries, I thought he got the batteries,
because that's typically how it goes, right? If I'm not doing something, Mike needs blah blah blah. Oh, Jay needs this,
exactly.
So let me go do that.
And I saw his batteries in the back seat of the car. I thought, oh, well, he must have put mine in the trailer, and then he saw, nothing in the trailer. Thought I put him in the front seat or in the back seat with his. So. Anyway, we wound up having a good time, and Jay, we basically each flew a flight.
Yeah, but I was feeling a little, I wouldn't say froggy. I was, I flew okay that day.
Yeah.
I was excited. I even decided to fly without my gyro on the whole time I was out there. But I flew okay, but I was having some issues.
A little apprehensive. Let me say that.
Yeah.
Just
so,
a little
my approaches weren't flying in the pattern was doing good. I was flying well in the pattern, but my approaches and landings were so. And like you said, I guess that's a good word for it. I was apprehensive. So when we came out the second time after the Cessna, mishap, we were out there, we had all the batteries.
So we had all 12 of mine, and then however many of his.
Yeah, my four
or five, and
so we got the flying, and so we started having a good time. And Mike was gracious enough about, after 2 or 3 flights, he started noticing some things. So he kind of put down his radio and his plane and came over and just started giving me a little one-on-one training time. And I greatly appreciate it because I went from being apprehensive to having fun. I wasn't nervous about the plane, and I was actually listening to what he was telling me, and the stuff he says actually works.
Yeah, I just looked at him and said, "You suck!"
You suck. Is that what your mama taught you?
Man, you're the worst pilot ever.
Ever. Why do I even fly with you?
You're just going to kill everybody.
But no. So he gave me a little instruction. So what were some of the things that I was doing that maybe some of the folks at home can learn from?
Well, that's a good question. There was nothing really like super major, oh my gosh, you're going to hurt yourself.
No, but there definitely was. Once again, there was this L39, three-wing L39 Motion RC.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a big difference between flying a prop plane and flying an EDF. There's some major differences. And although I'm conscious of those differences, I was still having some translation problems from one to the other. Yeah. And one of the major things, like I try to do coordinated turns when I turn. Okay, so I'm trying to keep the plane level. I'm conscious of trying to get my rudder finger in there when I'm doing stuff. And although it translates somewhat to doing flying jets, not so much when you're trying to bring the jet down, slow it down, and get it on the center line. So
so let's talk about that real quick. If you're doing coordinated turns with a propeller, you're fighting basically a P factor. So the airplane's moving forward and it's got a propeller on the front. In a jet, you've got rear propulsion, right? So you're being pushed through the air. And because of that, when you roll into a turn, let's just use 30 degrees of bank of turn. So you roll into a 30-degree bank turn, then your vertical component of lift goes away, and now you've got a horizontal component of lift. And so in order to make a level turn, you've got to load the airplane up or pull back on the stick. So the more level you want to go, the more you have to kind of pull, and it may not require as much rudder in the direction of the turn. It may not require any, right? I mean, you could just pull it around. But because we're used to flying propeller-driven airplanes and we've got that P factor that we're fighting, we put a little more rudder. So imagine this jet is flying along. It's super uber fast, right? Because you're just smoking down wind, and you roll into a 30-degree bank turn, and let's say you roll into a left turn and you put left rudder. Immediately, the airplane's going to pitch towards the ground because you told the rudder. The amount of rudder that you put in, it goes to just push the nose down. The nose is going to go in the direction of the rudder. And since you're already in this steeper bank, now the bank is going to roll even more, and you're going to find yourself going to the ground. And then you're kind of panicked, so you pull even harder, and now the nose kind of slices through, and then now you're climbing. So in this pattern that you flew, if you were just staying at pattern altitude, which we talked about the last time I was here, and you did a really good job just staying in the pattern. So you rolled in the turn, you would pull the aircraft around, and everything really looked good. But at the same time, now you were flying 2 or 3 mistakes high, which is just your confidence level. You weren't down below, right at your altitude. So now whenever you're downwind and you're trying to come down, you roll into a steep turn, and now the airplane is almost like a split S coming down towards final. And every time you did that, I would be like, oh, what are you doing? It looks like, because it almost looks like you're out of control, like you're just recovering from a bad maneuver, kind of, so to speak. And so what we did is we worked on power settings and what I call this load, or G-loading the airplane, which is just pulling back on the stick. So I kind of backed off of the rudder, and we rolled into a little steeper turn, and then we would pull the airplane around to bleed the speed off in the turn. And so the first couple of times we did it, the airplane still wanted to kind of, he still was on the rudder and it still was kind of diving towards the ground. And I had to get him out of that habit, because as he dove towards the ground, you developed all this speed. And then when you rolled out, all of a sudden you've got this speed, you're trying to slow down, you're at idle power, the airplane, you're
right. I'm just setting myself up for success.
Right. And now you're pitching because you're trying to slow, and it's climbing and descending, and you're like, oh, I have to get down. So you push the nose down, which would more speed, and on a propeller may slow you down, right? Because your propeller is spinning, but in a jet, it just speeds you up. And so this little porpoise effect, and then it's like, okay, we'll go around because you're not in a position to land, and I don't want you to force it. Or you got down too low, felt like you were too low, added a lot of power, got the nose high, and now the airplane's just about on the verge of a stall, and it's, coming in, and it's just going to drop out of the sky, and you're still, probably 12 feet in the air at the time.
Oh, yeah. Did we mention it was really, really, really windy out there?
It was, it was windy. It wasn't super windy, but it was pretty. It wasn't as windy as today, but
no.
It was
gusting.
So we just had to work on energy management. And I know a lot of guys in my professional career, and when I teach aerobatics, a lot of guys make fun of me because I'm always talking about energy management. But it means a lot to be able to be really fast and be able to load the airplane up and slow it down. And, I wasn't in the military. I wasn't a fighter pilot, but I do fly, competition aerobatics. And so we use the same concepts as the fighter type guys. I just don't do the fighter maneuvers. But there's a lot to be said about energy states, from the lowest energy state to the highest energy state, and how to convert those from one to the other, excuse me. And so we just worked on that. So I would get him going downwind, and then I would, the other thing that we're trying to do here too is that, Jay's never flown turbines. I'd like to get him on the sticks of a turbine. My L-39 is coming, along. And so in order to get him to understand some of these turbine aspects of flying, I needed him on the EDF to fly it more like a turbine. So just coming to idle power and just zipping into the ground isn't really necessarily going to work on a turbine, because if something happens, you have to go around. That's 8 seconds worth of spool up time that you're going to be like, oh, you're into the ground. So we're half throttle on the downwind. A beam our landing spot we're going to reduce to a quarter power. The nose is going to start dropping, and then the airplane, he's going to roll into a turn and bring the airplane around to a final approach. Just a 180-degree descending turn. Seemed to have a little issue with that concept mentally.
Yeah, I most certainly did. One, I was, now that I've been thinking about it, the key to success in all this maneuvers that we're talking about is less is more.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
And once I kind of got that concept, because once again you said, okay, you're gonna go ahead and put yourself into a descending turn, and I would go ahead and I'd do the 30 degrees of bank, and then I would start pulling through it. Well, I was waiting for the plane to drop and waiting. Well, I'd wait too long, or I would force it. I'd really pull back, because he's like, oh yeah, you got to really pull back. Well, I wasn't pulling back. It wouldn't be into the turn. I'd be pulling before that, and
actually, we're pulling after that.
Excuse me. After that. Mm-hmm. And I was actually diving the plane, and then I was fighting that dive, and I kept putting the plane in that same attitude every single time I went to make the turn.
Right.
And then you were like, okay, man, let me see what you're doing. And then we started talking about it a little bit more, and he's like, okay, see, you're cutting back to quarter power here. Then, leave the plane alone. And see, I was starting to drop. Okay, now go ahead and put it in the 30 degrees of bank and start pulling. Pull now. Oh, right now, or just a few seconds later? Right. That's when I was pulling. He's like, oh, no, start pulling now. And he goes, okay, you see that? You just pulled the plane. You pulled way too hard, but now, the plane, it was windy. So the plane, you almost stalled.
Right. He
goes, because you bled off, you killed all your energy when you were pulling so hard. So just really modulate, how hard you're pulling, just to see how much, where the plane's going to end up. And I started doing that. I go, okay, now I got the amount of feel for how much I have to pull back on the stick and where I'm doing it. Oh, click, got it.
It was kind of really cool to watch the light bulb come on, because you were really frustrated initially, and, you were kind of like, oh, man, I know I can get this, and it just doesn't seem right. And then, you're like, here's the sticks. Can you show me? And so I did that landing where I just came in there and just rolled it on. And then you're like, okay, that's, I got to do this. So we went up a little higher, and we just practiced rolling into the turn and then pulling really hard.
That really helped, actually. Going up high and just pulling up high, doing that. Because once I was up there and the fear factor was away, right? I wasn't trying to land.
Right. I
was just trying to do the maneuver and just pulling for all it's worth and then just figuring it out. That really helped.
So then the other thing that we did is we changed your perspective because we moved down to the end of the runway down there instead of standing in the middle of the field. So that way you could kind of get a better view of when to do everything. And then, like you were just saying, then we went up and did the power to idle.
Yep. So
power to idle and then let the airplane just start a natural descent. So we went up 2 or 3 mistakes even further. So you're a lot higher than you would normally be.
We were up there. Yeah.
But now the airplane can come down a lot longer, and we started pulling the power back a beam midfield instead of where we were, so that the descent actually happens, while we can see it. And then at that point, it was roll into a 90 and give it a pull.
Yep.
And so now he was able to kind of feel that pull, and as the nose started kind of naturally dropping and carving this 180-degree turn, then it was a lot easier for him to see that, oh, now I just have to pull or let off the pressure. And it was just pressure. It's not, we talk about pulling on the stick. Right. We're not burying the stick. We're just putting pressure on it to get that airplane to turn. And then now when he rolled out on final, the nose was up. He had the power in there. He kind of came up with the power. So once he kind of got that feel, then we dropped it back down to where the normal pattern altitude was. And I said, okay, now just throw the gear and the flaps out and bring the throttle back to a quarter and just allow the airplane to start a natural descent and then roll it in and modulate that stick, just enough pressure to get it to continue to come around. And then as it comes around, you have to come off the stick because the wind was blowing. And, that energy is going to keep you in there. And then you're looking for this descent rate. Oh, my gosh. The light bulb came on. It was the most beautiful approach. It was a perfect 180-degree lined up right on the center line, held the power in there, didn't pitch it. We had this little pitchiness going on before, and all that kind of stopped. Came in and, just painted it on the grass strip. So, and I think when that happened, you just saw his shoulders relax, his big smile on his face. He was just like, oh my gosh, I think I got it. So then I'm like, well, I got 5 more batteries in there, use them all. So we just started loading batteries into his airplane, and he just kept doing,
and then I think the emergency procedure things when you were just calling, okay, cut the power, you got to land.
And so that's the other thing that we did. He would take off, and as he turned downwind, I was like, okay, now you lost your engine, you got to get it back. And so he'd just go to idle power, and come back around, and then would put ourselves into the wind with no gear and flaps, just to see how slow it would go, and then what the descent rate was, and then I'd have him throw all the gear and the flaps out, and kind of come in. And I think we went around once or twice, but then you landed out of one. So. And I think you got a better understanding now, too.
It was good practice.
Yeah. You got a better understanding
and it was fun. I was having fun when you were like, you lost your engine. Oh, boy. Then it started to become a challenge. I didn't get it every time, but it was a lot of fun to practice. And it reminded me a lot of when we used to do the sim together.
Yes.
And then we'd
hit the F key.
Hit the F key, and we'd be breaking off parts. Right. And we're like, you got to get back to the field. Okay, you got to land it. Yeah, you only have one wing, but you got to land it. And so that was a lot of fun. Yeah. You didn't always make it, but when you did, then you had bragging rights, right?
Yep, we sure did. And we slowly moved back towards the center of the field too. We got away from the end again because once he started getting the understanding of how to make it work, we just moved everything back to the normal position. So, but I think now that if you went out and flew your L-39 by yourself, there would be no.
No, I definitely feel that session right there helped me a lot. I feel a lot more confident, and I just feel better about myself and the plane and the capabilities, and that I'm not going to ball it up, because once again, this is a gift for my my co-host here. So
I'll have to wait till I come back and ball it up, since that seems to be
that's okay. You gave it to me, you could take it away. So, but no, all that kind of went away, and then I just started having a lot of fun. I was having fun.
Really
and
having a lot of fun.
And then once I'm starting to have fun, then the learning is getting easier because I knew that we actually glossed over one highlight that happened to me. And I think that was something else that kind of helped me.
What was that?
Yeah, well, when I was first just trying to do all those maneuvers, and I think it was the very first battery that I had in there.
Oh, yeah, the little snap roll.
The little snap roll. So, folks, it's the first time I'm getting what he told me to do, right? He's like, okay, you do this, and I'm like, okay, I bring it in. I'm like, wow, I'm right on the center line. I bled off all that power. I'm right in the groove. And as I'm kind of just jockeying it around to bring it into the slot to come in, the plane just snaps. Whoop! Just like that.
Yeah, it rolled on its back.
It rolled on its back, and I go, I think I lost. I thought, I just yelled at him. I'm like, I think I had a brownout because I didn't know what was going on. I think it browned out. And he's like, what? And the plane flipped on its back, and I don't even remember what I did, but I rolled it out, and then I'm like, oh, I'm landing. I go back around, I come back, and I land. And he's like, well, he goes, you had a brownout. How do you know it was a brownout? And I go, I don't know. The plane just flipped up on its back. It just, that's the only thing it could be a brownout, I guess, because I just lost control. I scared the bejeebies out of me.
Right.
But after calming down a bit and cleaning my shorts and thinking about it. I
was able to duplicate it.
Yeah. We had NTSB to give us a report. And what did they say, Mike?
When you get slow and you exercise full back stick with a little bit of aileron or a little bit of rudder in there, you will get a snap roll. And in this particular airplane, it just rolls on its back. Now, lucky for Jay, he didn't just pull the stick all the way, into his belly, so to speak. He just didn't bury the stick. It kind of surprised him, and I think he let go, but he kept, he went ahead and rolled it all the way back around normal. So, but he did accidentally hit the flap switch. So from what we've kind of figured out is that as he was coming around final, he got a little bit slow, and he was adding a little rudder to kind of move the nose into the wind and pitched up. And at the same time, he had started lowering the flap, so the airplane was getting slower and slower. And anyway, he kind of pulled the stick back a little bit too quickly, and the airplane just kind of snapped over on its back. I was able, when we talked about this, he's like, no, that's not what I did. I'm like, okay, let's hold on. And we jumped back in the airplane, we took it up, and I was able to kind of, on a higher downwind, I was able to get it to do the same thing where I was like, okay, here we go. And it snapped over on its back, and I just rolled it around. I go, that's really what happened. And we looked over the airplane. There's nothing wrong with it. The receiver wasn't flashing as a brownout or any of that stuff. So, but the good news is that in this particular case, it was low to the ground, and he did the right thing. He just rolled it, upright. He came out of the stick, which is the important thing to do. He kind of pushed forward on it, but he didn't panic and actually got it on the ground. So that was kudos to you, and that's a good learning experience.
And that's when I started less is more. I'm not. Right. This is one of the first times it was like, okay, left hand, stop touching the rudder.
Right. Exactly.
And after I stopped doing that,
and then later on when we were doing some of those maneuvers, there was a couple of times where you really pulled hard and the whole airplane squatted, and you saw the wing drop. And had you been on the rudder in that direction, it would have rolled over. Yeah. But so we kind of figured it out that there was one or two spots where he was pulling into the wind and getting really aggressive, and the wind was kicking up high enough. It was really above where we were, but it was strong enough that the airplane slowed way down. And he needed more power in there, but at this particular moment in time, he just didn't have it, and it just rolled over. Yeah. So it was pretty impressive. I thought he did it on purpose. I was like, wow, this guy's really getting confident.
Wow, look at what he's doing. This low to the ground. Right? That's pretty. But, he's getting a little frisky. Mike, I did not do that on purpose. I wish I was cool enough head to say, did you see that, Mike? Did you see that?
Yeah.
But I was not.
Yeah, imagine that.
Didn't expect that from me, did you? No.
Nope, I sure didn't. So,
but anyway. No, great day, man. I put a smile on my face, and I was, even though it was pretty hot out there, thank goodness that it was so windy, it kept us cool at least. But it was a super fun time, and I learned a lot, and my confidence level is sky high.
Well, it'll be exciting to hear, some of this now that he can get out on his own and fly. Because I did notice when we got here, we put our airplanes in the trailer, and I mentioned the fact that he hadn't flown his L-39 in a while. And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I think you flew it the last time I was here. He goes, I don't know. I could have flown it after that. I said, impossible. There's cobwebs on the main gear. I go, if you had flown it since then, there would be no cobwebs. It was funny. It was a whole spider web like on the nose gear with the gear door, and I was like, "Yeah, you haven't flown this in a while. Let's go fly it." So, but I'm glad that you feel more confident with it, and I think you're going to have a blast. I think we were on the second to last battery, and you wanted to take a water break or something, and so I got my new motor, and I know we mentioned it on the one of the last podcasts that we flew it up there. But
talk about that.
Yeah, our hour's up, so we're gonna have to go. But
is it really?
Yeah, it'll have to be another topic. But
crap.
But it was a good time, and I was able to really kind of put the screws to or just put this motor to the test, and I really really like it. And with the wind that we had, the downwind legs were just smoking fast, and it allowed me to get a lot of vertical and do a lot of really cool tumble stuff. And so I kind of did a little air show for Jay, and did some really cool snappy maneuvers, and kind of hung on the tail.
So you're saying the purchase was good?
Yes, it was very good. Yeah.
Okay,
it was worth it. I liked it.
So you would recommend that to our listeners?
I would, yeah. I went with the Freewing. Mine was the original version, so it came with the Outrunner.
Outrunner, yeah.
And I
this
changed
one's the
it,
Inrunner,
the Inrunner, correct.
Yeah.
So this is the HET Inrunner. It does run very well, especially down here. I mean, it ran really well at Scott's place. I mean, even up in Boulder when I flew it off of the grass, it wasn't so good. But when I flew it off of the pavement. I think I told that story right there.
Pavement-ish.
The neighborhood. It was the street in front of Scott's buddy's house. But when I flew it up there, it did perform very well. It wasn't quite as speedy as it was here, but we had a lot of wind. So until I get back to Phoenix and, kind of put it to its test out there against the other two,
I definitely couldn't keep up with you for that.
No, I was at a quarter throttle, and I was still kind of
smoking past me.
Eking past you, yeah. So. But I'm pretty impressed. So, well, that doesn't even cover all of our antics.
I know, right?
We flew the Hadron today. Actually,
that's right.
And,
we flew that today.
I'm not. Have to save that for another podcast. But yeah, our hour's up, and it's been a great time. Unfortunately, Mike, had to work, but and my time here is growing short, so I have to kind of go back.
Once again, it goes really quick, right? So
I feel like I just got here and it's been like 2 weeks.
I know.
So.
I know. It's like we got a lot of planes that we haven't even built. I have to say, maybe it's because it's still the summer. It's kind of hot for us here.
Yeah, that's true.
We just haven't been super motivated. I mean, I think about some of the times for the Electric Festival, we put together 3 planes in like less than 3 days.
This
type
is
of
true.
thing.
Yep,
and
that's very
here
true.
it's like I got plenty of stuff for us to do and play with, and we barely completed 1 or 2 projects, and half started a couple other ones, but your score, video games has gone way up. Oh,
don't tell anybody.
Different podcast.
That's true. We have played a few. Well, once again, we're going to give a shout out to Eric Haddad over at 3D Aero Ventures. He is getting his stuff all set up. We're excited to look at some of his files and the new airplanes coming out. 3daeroventures.com. Type in Park Flyer, get our discount on your downloads for 3D printed airplanes. And then make sure you put an A-Power battery in there at rcbatteriesusa.com. Type in PFPC10 to receive our discount. So,
hey, and once again, folks, if you have some ideas for content or some questions, please do not fail to give us a call.
That's true.
At 830-444-4943. Once again, that's 834-444-4943.
Yep, we love to hear from our listeners. You can email us at parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com, or you can comment on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go over there and subscribe. So let us know how we're doing. We always love to hear from you guys. Also, jump on our Park Flyer Podcast listeners group. Our group is growing every day. We get more and more and more.
And please, folks, post your crazy stuff that you're doing,
Absolutely.
Projects you're working on. We may give you a call or ask you to be on the show or see something interesting and talk about it on the podcast. So put some content, put some stuff out there that you're doing, please.
Yeah, and give us a little time, because I know we always talk about getting in touch with you guys, but then things get in the way and we got to do another one.
I got to go to Hong Kong. I got to go to Antarctica.
So we're going to leave Jay to try and touch base with some of these guys. But Anyway, I guess that's it for us for this podcast. We appreciate you joining us, and man, we'll see you in 2 weeks from Texas. I am Michael from Arizona,
And I'm Jay from the hills of Texas.
and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
See ya. Let's fly.
You have been listening to the Park Flyer Podcast. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to your next visit. Please give our show a star rating and review, and feel free to email us your questions, topics, or suggestions to parkflyerpodcast@gmail.com.